Welcome to another episode of Viatorian Voices Conversations on the Way. In this episode, we want to spotlight some discernment resources that Viatorians have assembled over the past several years. In particular, we want to share with you some different ways to think about major moments of discernment. We often call these discernment lenses, since they're various outlooks to bring into these times of prayer and deliberation. Much like a healthy approach to prayer, a healthy approach to discernment includes an openness to different angles, styles, and questions. Taking the insights and clarities of your discernment and running them through different checks can help you deepen your understanding of where God may be inviting you. Using these approaches may require some patience, as new questions can challenge you and perhaps shake your certainty. Tread lightly into these areas and see how your heart responds. Trust your instincts as to whether it's a good time to refilter your discernment through different ideas and discover new insights as you pray. I'm Pre-Associate Dan Masterton, and I'll be your host for this episode. For each lens, I'll share a brief description and some directions for how you could use it in your life. Enjoy! Father Himes' 3 questions. The late Father Michael Himes was a diocesan priest of the Diocese of Brooklyn. He became well known for a fairly simple, yet potentially very insightful way of vetting one's discernment and what one feels God may be inviting them to do. Father Himes says you should ask 3 simple questions of your potential invitation. Does it bring you joy? Are you good at it? Does the world need it? Your answers to these 3 questions can help you more deeply understand where God may be inviting you. Does it bring you joy? Are you good at it? Does the world need it? Either toward or away. This lens can help a discerner more broadly consider their life and whether or not the full context of their life is a good and healthy place for faithful discernment to unfold. It requires you to look at how you spend your time and where you dedicate your energy. Considering and accepting that we need to allow ourselves some rest and some leisure to commit to good self-care, the discerner then needs to ask a challenging question of each of those things that receives their time and energy. Does this thing lead me toward God or pull me away from God? Typically, there's usually more than 2 valid choices with a question like this. However, few things in life are neutral with respect to this question, and the spiritually serious way of answering this prompt admits that if something isn't specifically and actively leading you toward God, then it's almost certainly in some way pulling you away from God. Perhaps think of it then as a continuum. Something is almost certainly either bringing you somehow closer to God or somehow further from God. Faithful discernment and rich lives of faith are best aided by eliminating those things that draw you away from God and maximizing those things that lead you toward God. So as you journal, pray, or converse, ask the question about each thing that you're investing time and energy into. Is this thing leading me toward God or away from God? Immersive decision making. When faced with multiple options, decisions can become paralyzingly difficult. Overanalysis can freeze up our thinking and leave us indecisive. Additionally, we sometimes are facing 2 paths that are both potentially good and fruitful. Many decisions involve choosing one good over another good. If all decisions were between a good thing and a bad thing, the process would be a lot simpler. One way to resolve this is by immersing yourself in each outcome one at a time. Select one of the possible outcomes and choose one day during which you'll immerse yourself in it completely, as if you've decided in favor of taking this path. For instance, take considering whether to apply to join a religious community for formation for religious life, or continuing living in your current state of life. First, choose one day when you'll act as if you've decided to apply and enter religious formation if accepted. Go through that day acting as if it's a final decision. See how it makes you feel. Pay attention to your emotions. At the end of the day, take stock of how the day felt altogether. Then, the next day, act as if you've decided not to apply, and instead simply remain in your state of life, considering that you've closed that door, at least for the time being. At the end of the day, take stock of that day's feelings. After the 2 days, compare and contrast the summative feel that you gained from each of the days. The emotions that each immersive day evoked should be quite telling toward where your heart is drawn in discernment. If both days felt uncomfortable in bad ways, as opposed to being nervous about going beyond your comfort zone or trying something new, it might indicate that you need to slow down and reevaluate your discernment. Your clearer understanding of God's invitation likely lies with the option that felt best during its immersive day. Open-ended discernment. Sometimes people simply need deadlines. Procrastination, waffling, or laziness can lead to a lack of decision, and a deadline requires a decision to be made by a certain point. Frequently, life provides us these horizons. These timeframes can be challenging, but can also bring a structure that can support good decision making. In other cases, situations have no firm deadline. There are opportunities in life that are sort of always available and possible. In a lot of ways, religious life and priesthood, for example, are perennially available and possible. While some religious communities certainly have expectations and restrictions about applying, accompanied discernment and application are widely available to people of faith who are independent, healthy, and thoughtful. As such, it's up to discerners to figure out if they need to act with urgency and embrace time frames when applying to religious life or considering any other decision, or if they're better off keeping their discernment open-ended and dwelling in it for a longer period of time. Open-ended discernment can be a definite grace and blessing to the right person in the right context. Uncertainty can actually help keep your mind open and fresh. This mindset can be revelatory and give you the space to deepen your clarity. You also have greater latitude to do some trial and error with different mindsets, with different styles of prayer, with different modes of accompaniment and conversation with others. Your process can have less pressure and constraint, and you can then engage your discernment with a uniquely open mind. Gradually, this context may evolve as your insight and clarity warrant more serious consideration of making a decision or moving forward in some way. That will come with deadlines and timeframes, but the positives of that structure may then be very welcome and constructive to your discernment at that point. Frederick Buechner's definition. The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Frederick Buechner shared this great wisdom on vocation. If you break it down with discernment in mind, it can provide good insight to help decipher the things you find in your prayer and in your conversations. First, ask, what are my greatest gifts and passions? Look at your life and identify those places where you feel most alive, most engaged, most enthusiastic. Consider the ways you spend your time, professionally and personally, and identify those things you feel particularly skilled and capable at doing. Second, ask, what are the world's greatest needs? Look around society, your local community, wider areas like your state or country, and even the global community, and consider what deficits exist in terms of accompanying and supporting people, especially with respect to their human dignity, inclusion in society, and support of their needs and rights. Finally, pair these two reflections by asking, how can my gifts and passions serve the needs of the world? Your vocation almost certainly exists somewhere in the overlap between the ways you answer those first two questions. Your discernment will likely tell you to pursue the state of life and lifestyle that give you the greatest opportunity to pursue this discovered vocation. As Frederick Buechner says, the place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Remain active in service. Discernment can become very internal. Because it is so dependent on faithful prayer and personal reflection, discernment can require a lot of time alone and an exhausting amount of energy. One way to keep yourself nourished and sustained is by emphasizing interpersonal experiences, where you can continue building and maintaining relationships and having good conversations. As part of this focus, it's best practice to be active in service. While acts of community service are valuable in their own right, Service that takes place during meaningful discernment should be focused on encounter and accompaniment with people on the margins and people who are in vulnerable situations. Not only is this valuable in the way it provides help and support to people with great needs, but it also helps the discerners connect with and potentially form relationships with people in a different and important way. These encounters typically evoke a level of vulnerability and authenticity from people doing service that they might not otherwise reach in humdrum daily life. Ideally, these service experiences are formative and impact the discerner because of the bonds formed with people, and the way that the discerner takes these experiences to prayer, to journaling, and to conversations, and discovers the way that Christ is present in the interactions with these people, and the way that Christ and the Holy Spirit are present moving in the heart of the person serving, and pointing them to the ways that service of others can be part of living out their own vocation. Insights from Viatorian Spirituality. The Viatorian tradition is rich in spiritual insights, especially in the writings of our founder, Venerable Louis Querbes. The official documents that the community has composed contain lots of great wisdom based on the things that Father Querbes taught to early Viatorians and left to us to continue directing our spirituality. Here are some of the great insights for discernment and the potential invitations God may be offering to Viatorians and to those in our communities. We must become saints, especially myself. I am more than ever aware that God is asking sacrifices of me. God's kind grace makes me ready to embrace them. Venerable Louis Querbes. You must take time to relax and think. In this you will find comfort, for it will provide two satisfying answers. I do not want to offend God, and I work for God alone. Do not worry about anything else. Venerable Louis Querbes. The vocation of a Viatorian is a call from God that we answer continually. It is a grace given to each of us so that together we might work for the coming of God's rule and for our own personal sanctification. Viatorian Constitutions, number 25. We must place ourselves more than ever in His hands, for God protects His children and leads us by the hand. Venerable Louis Querbes. Viatorians strive to do everything well so that through us Jesus may be adored and loved. The vocation of a Viatorian and members of Viatorian communities lies in how we hear this, how we receive it, and the response we discern in our prayer, and the way we act to bring this love into reality in our Viatorian communities, in our church, and in our world. That's all for this episode of Viatorian Voices. Thank you for listening, and we hope that these tips for discernment can be impactful and useful for you in your personal prayer life and in the ways that you walk with others who are discerning God's invitations and their response. Anyone who's interested in a discernment aid can reach out to Vocation Ministry at vocations@viatorians.com or by DMing us on social media at Viatorian USA or Viatorian YA on the way. We would be happy to send you one of our two books, either our discernment aid for young adults, which includes discernment and prayer tips like these, or our more intensive aid meant particularly for young men considering religious life with the Viatorians. If you're interested in either, please send a message and we'd be happy to send you a PDF electronically or mail you a paperback of one or both books. Viatorian Voices Conversations on the Way is a production of Viatorian Vocation Ministry. The Viatorians are professed brothers and priests, together with women and men lay associates, who proclaim Jesus Christ and His gospel and raise communities where faith is lived, deepened, and celebrated. In the footsteps of Venerable Louis Querbes and under the patronage of Saint Viator, we strive to do everything well so that through us Jesus may be adored and loved. To learn more about our community, visit Viatorians.com or follow us on social media at Viatorian USA. Young adults interested in connecting with other Viatorian young adults and staying plugged into Viatorian young adult faith formation, community, and service events should request to follow our private Instagram at Viatorian YA on the way and can complete our welcome form by visiting bit.ly/YA-on-the-way. We'd be happy to connect with you in this way and include you in the community we're building online and in person. Those seeking support and accompaniment in exploring God's invitation for them are invited to reach out to Vocation Ministry. Send us a DM on social media or email us to start a conversation. On behalf of Brother Peter and the Viatorian community, I'm Pre-Associate Dan Masterton. Venerable Louis Curbs, inspire us. St. Viator, pray for us. Adored and loved be Jesus.